All right, Scotty, you there?
Here.
All right, cool. So guys, this is just a video we've been talking about literally for like a year now. We're all rolling on this stuff for just kind of everybody out there, especially kids we work with. But this is aimed to target Little League, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and beyond, and even college guys. And we'll take this back to college ball. I coach at Hope College. Scotty played ball there. Benny played college ball out in Minnesota and in Southern California as well. And this is just something for kids and players just to get healthy. Use this time, use this break to get healthy. But even after the break, use this as a reference go-to. Just for health and wellness in general within the game of baseball, and softball players as well can definitely utilize this. But I wanted to open the floor to you, Scott, just to kind of introduce yourself, your background, and kind of talk a little bit more about your professional career.
Sure. So Scott Snyder, I was a baseball player, Hope College, graduated 2010. I played football as well at Hope. 3 years of football, 4 years of baseball. Went on to graduate school, physical therapy school in Cincinnati, Ohio, College of Mount St. Joe University. Sorry, College of Mount St. Joe, now it's Mount St. Joe University after I left. Then I took a job. I worked for a company called Athletico Physical Therapy. I started in 2014. I started out in the Chicagoland area, northwest suburbs. Got into almost immediately, based on my background, got into working with athletes, working with overhead athletes specifically. So what that looks like at the front end is a lot of learning about biomechanics, where the arm slots, where's our shoulder supposed to be, where's our elbow supposed to be, throughout the different ranges and throughout the different phases of the pitching motion. Now, as we know now, and as we're starting to continue to learn more about, is a lot of focus is on the arm, but really the emphasis now is specifically during these times, these down times, is how do we keep our legs and how do we keep our core and how do we keep the rest of our body in shape. Devin and we were talking last night, and we're talking about what is arm care. It's like, well, arm care now is body care, is everything care. So, think of the arm as just the medium to transfer the force from your legs out to the ball. So throughout that whole time, all the force generated, all the force absorption, the majority of that is happening lower half through the trunk, like I said, and then just extending out to the ball through the arm. So I'm lucky enough to, I was trained by a guy who was a PT with the Chicago Cubs. When I was in the Chicagoland area, I worked for the same company I did at the time, and have continued my education in that way, taking courses, elbow courses, shoulder courses specific to the overhead athlete. I do throwing analyses now, which Devin has seen a few. I've worked with Hope a little bit on that with their pitching staff. A little bit as a screen, but a little bit to point out if there are areas where maybe some weakness would pop up, where we think that place would be in the throwing motion, and then being able to pass that along to what I call the performance experts on how to go about translating that into their performance on the field. So, that's kind of my thing. I obviously have a passion in it. I still enjoy, staying active. We're just sharing our half day off exercise routines that we went through today. So I'm still active in learning about it, which of course is the way to get better at it, I think, and I think is the only way to go about it. I steal a lot of things from other people, which, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, if you want to think of it that way. So I steal from a lot of experts, and putting into practice, anecdotally, the stories that I have, good, bad, otherwise, bits and pieces from different things to kind of create my own treatment plan. Obviously, it's always very individualized, based on age, based on development, based on what level, based on a lot of things, based on a lot of factors. So it's all very, very individualized, which makes it fun, makes it a little more interesting, and allows us to, again, put together something that is specific to the athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get too far on like age-specific stuff, I really want to get into that stuff in a little bit. I want to touch back on what you talked about, just the mechanics side of things, and just the whole body as a support system in general. I want to talk about just kind of the key points throughout, especially like a pitching motion, and even like infielders, when they're winding up and looking to throw that ball across the diamond with some gusto behind it. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that, and what is going to support us? What kind of points are we looking for in that support system, and kind of what phases in the throwing motion are we really looking to be super cautious of as we're kind of getting into that full, I think you call it acceleration point, right?
Sure. So I guess the way to think of it, any throw, we see it more with pitchers, obviously, because they have the most throws per game. They have the most force behind their throws per game. Catchers are second, not only throws back to the pitchers, but different throws around the diamond. Pitchers and catchers are where we see the most injury based on overuse. So what we focus on a lot of, and again, depends on what level we're at, but we start with single plane motion, uniplanar motion. So the way to think of it is if you cut a line right down the middle of you going front and back, you cut a line right through you going side to side, and then we have one cutting like right through the middle of you. You can't see me, but like waistline where we rotate over the top. So there's 3 planes that we work in mostly. The tricky thing about a baseball throw, even a baseball swing, is we're working in all 3 of those planes all at the same time. What we are able to do, luckily, with baseball throws specifically, is we can focus on whatever dominant side, a thrower, baseball, softball. I work with tennis, guys that are serving. I work with fly ball hitters, all these different things. They usually have a dominant side. So what we're able to do is we're able to work, whether it's force production or force absorption. Those are kind of the two things that start with the lower half. You need both, and you need it from different parts of the body. So if I'm a right-handed thrower, my right side is creating a lot of force production. My left side is creating a lot of force absorption, or receiving a lot of force absorption. And the way that we're able to train those things is we work a lot of unilateral, uniplanar things initially until they master those, and then we start to work that into the whole body of motion. So working up into the core, what we have to master first is what's called anti-rotation strength. So we have to be able to stabilize. We all have seen the 14-year-old who is 6 inches taller than his teammates, or the 13-year-old who's 6 inches taller than his teammates, but doesn't necessarily have the control over all of his extremities. He's all knees and elbows, or he's a baby giraffe, or he's Bambi, or whatever metaphor you want to use. That's how those guys move. So a lot of those guys, we're focusing on more core stabilization, more anti-rotation. Once they're able to get the anti-rotation activities down. So how do we do that? We work on placing them in different, different phases of stability. Are they on one leg? Are they on 2 legs? Are they kneeling? Are they half kneeling? Are they on their front leg extended? Are they on their back leg loading? In all those places, we're working different things, upper body, and trying to throw them off balance, and they just have to maintain. So we start there. Once we can master that, then we say, okay, let's move on to the next phase of it with the core, which is now we're controlling rotation. So we got anti-rotation, obviously with the throwing motion. Again, if I'm right-handed, we're coming across our left side and bringing our right side through. Now we have to be able to not only create rotation, but control that rotation as it comes through, which is, again, kind of the next phase of what we do. The beauty of the core and the lower extremity stuff, like what I see on the rehabilitative side of all of it, a lot of times by the time they get to a return to throwing program, they're done with me, right? So we get them set. Okay, you start the return to throwing. I may do a little bit in the clinic the first few days. Someone, like I just had a kid who had a ulnar collateral ligament, Tommy John repair instead of reconstruction, using an internal brace. So we take them all the way for 12 weeks. It's pretty similar. Throughout those, you're like, Scott, what are you doing in 12 weeks? You can't even throw. You can't do, you can't do anything. So we work on getting motion back, and we hammer lower extremity strength. We hammer core strength. We do as much as we can for the muscles like around the shoulder blade to get good scapular control without even, before they even put a ball in their hand, for 10 weeks, 12 weeks, that's what we're doing. To make sure that they have all the necessary, again, whether it's creating stabilization or controlling rotation or whatever it is as the ball or the forces travel up to the arm through the ball before they even put a ball in their hand. So that's a lot of the stuff, we're talking about now. We're at home. We're stuck at home. Can't throw. I don't have 90 feet in my house to throw. I don't have Sports Quest maybe that I can go to. I don't have somewhere where I can go. And so the beauty of that is, we're hammering a lot of single leg activities, unilateral activities, core strengthening activities. And as Devin knows, and like we're accessible, that in this time we can reach out to Devin. You can reach out to Baseball Concepts, you can reach out to myself, no matter what it is, and I'll get you, my contact information as well. Is okay. Well, what kind of plan can we put together? I mean, I work out, half the time in my basement with a 100-year-old treadmill, and then a hand-me-down bench press and some rubber bands and like some stairs that I use for different types of body weight stuff. I do a ton of the stuff that I preach, just because, as you'll see, and as you guys probably do see, aside from powerlifting, and we do need some brute strength for some of these activities. Now it's all getting geared towards function. It's all getting geared towards, okay, what do I need to do, and how do we control all these things? Again, I always use the example of like injury prevention. The guys getting injured in the NFL and the NBA and the MLB are not in bad shape. It's not because they're not strong. It's not because they're not big. It's not because they're not fast. It's because for whatever reason, the forces that were applied to them at that time, their body wasn't able to handle in enough time. So, the forces put on your body when you're throwing are, like they sound made up. The guys that have the ability to research the biomechanics, like down to the degrees of velocity that are, or the degrees per second that your arm is creating and your arm is moving from late cocking, which is what we talked about, kind of that layback position, where we have the most strain. That's definitely where we have the most strain, is moving from that late cocking into acceleration for the most part. And then the second part is, coincidentally, is when we let go, how do we decelerate? What muscles are we using to decelerate? Are we using our arm to do all of it? Are we not absorbing through the legs? Are we not absorbing through the core? If we're using our arm for all of it, then we got other problems. Maybe not the Tommy John, and maybe not the labral tear or labral issue, but something like posterior cuff, posterior shoulder. Those are the things we see a ton with that. They don't have good scapular control, and the arm's just flailing. And if they're not using their legs, then if they want to throw with any velocity at all, which everybody does, they have to find some way to control it. And usually they're creating force improperly and absorbing force improperly, which all ends up going to the shoulder or the arm or the upper extremity in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I want to get into right after this talking about kind of the preventative maintenance stuff. We put together an arm care program personally, and I shouldn't say we. Ben put together an arm care program for us for our pitchers, as he has done it for a long time. And we're going to get into a little bit right after this, just how, both coming from 2 labral tears and rotator cuff tears, 2 surgeries, and 2 completely different recovery times and recovery process period. We'll touch on that in a minute. But what I really want to do is kind of build off of that. So the late cocking through the acceleration, I don't know, I think you said it was 7,000 degrees per second.
Yeah, we talked yesterday. Yeah, they've measured in, the guys that have I always think of, I'm an old video gamer, like the motion capture. They put all the little like balls on all the guys, and they watch them. But they do that and just have guys pitch, and then they got slow motion cameras up top. They got them in front. They got them on each side. They got them behind, and they can measure anything you want. And what they do, they're finding that moving through that phase, the body, the arm is moving, is what's called internally rotating. So coming from the layback and rotating the arm forward at like upwards of like 7,000 degrees per second, which is insane. It's absolutely insane. It's numbers that they can't like create. Like you can barely even create that in a lab if you wanted to, but your body does that. Now he's doing it 100 times a game. Now he's doing it 100 times every other week. And we figure out, like Syndergaard, you saw Syndergaard just got put down for Tommy John. I don't know if you guys saw that. It just popped up. Any of those, it's like Sale's down, Syndergaard's down. Like all these guys that throw, they figure out why they can't throw 100 miles an hour 100 times a game, over and over and over again. Your body's just not built to do it. There's a book called The Arm. It's written by a guy named Jeff Passan, who's now, I don't know if he works for ESPN now, but anyway, a journalist. And he interviewed the guy who's the doctor for the Los Angeles Dodgers, and the guy who's doing like some of their elbow stuff. And he says, basically, he tells people, he's like, I'm going to put this back together so you can tear it apart again. When he's talking with baseball players, he's like, your arm's just not built to do it. He's like, I'll gladly do it, and I know that that's what people want, and everyone hears Tommy John, and they either think one way, they either think that's what I need to get back to where I was, or oh no, like I definitely don't want to do that. But we've seen some success with guys, and we talked about it a little bit yesterday. Like Strasburg had it done, and he's back to pitching at a high level. unfortunately, he's kind of an outlier. There are some other guys, but as we talked yesterday, statistically, they say 80% of guys get back to their pre-injury level after a Tommy John repair. Now, I don't have specifically the stats on who that research was on. My guess is high-level athletes to begin with, not myself or other people that are, normal. But 80% of them return to their previous level. The caveat being that return to previous level was for an average of 100 innings at whatever level they were at, whether that was college or pro or high school or little league or whatever it was. 100 extra, 100 innings post-surgery. 80% of people were able to do that. And again, you take out the Strasburgs who were able to throw 200-plus innings for a couple years now. To get to that 100-inning average, we got a lot of guys much, much lower than that. So interesting stuff. And the research on it is ever changing, which is cool. This new bracing, like we talked about, the internal brace is hopefully we'll change it for the better. Hopefully we'll have better outcomes with it. We definitely have better recovery times as of right now. We'll see long term, which is kind of said, we call the if they stay, the mortality rate, or if people are able to stay in it. But we basically, will the brace stay intact? And hopefully it does. So we'll see.
Yeah, we just saw yesterday that John Schmaltz is the only player in the Hall of Fame gotten Tommy John. And I was like, wow, out of all the, I never even, thought about that. But talk about outliers. Crazy.
The other part is you don't know back in the day, like the Whitey Fords and the Cy Youngs, theirs were probably blown out and they were just, throwing in some red band and going out there, like who knows. But still, definitely the guys that we know about because that surgery didn't even get done until I think it was like early 70s or something like that was when Tommy John had it done. By Job. I think it was Frank Job. Doesn't matter. Whoever it was. You guys have heard of Job's probably, the arm exercises Job's. Dr. Frank Job. He's kind of the famous doctor who came up with that plan. I think he's the guy who did the surgery. But either way, did it on Tommy John sometime in the 70s. But either way, one guy who's had it done, who's in the because in that book it's crazy. There's as high school and travel ball goes, which is insane. There's parents who will proactively or preventatively have preventatively asked, their kid will go in with a medial elbow issue, inside of the elbow issue, and it's not torn. They're like, well, should we just do it to get it over with? Like what? They people are because there is the re-tear rate is lower, or you have a less chance of re-tearing it. But like we said, 80% of guys get back to their previous level for an average of 100 innings, which is not that good. But who knows? Hopefully those numbers will go up.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. So building on that, I do want to, just so the viewers can see and you can get eyes on it kind of right here as well, the stuff that Benny's put together for our guys and stuff that we're doing. And obviously it's a tiered system depending on how old you are. And we do weights, but it's very, very, very small. 2.5-pound plates is what we recommend to the high school athlete that's in good shape. And if they go up at all, it would be no more than 5 pounds. So Benny, why don't you walk through kind of what that looks like? I can kind of pull this out a little bit, make it a little bit better here. Yeah. And we'll just kind of walk you through what we're doing for our kids.
Yeah, so what we have, you want to angle this a little bit better? I'll pull it back a little bit. So ideally, we would have 2.5-pound plates, right? So I'm going to just speak from, say, both, if I got a fence right towards me, we're going to pull them back. We're going to flip it around. We're going to be here, keeping our elbows in line with our shoulders the entire time. We're then here. I don't know if you could see me pulling away, flipping it around, coming back this way again. We got the same thing. We got basically reverse flies that we're coming here. Flip it back around, flies. We go through our throwing motion with this. Not really through our throwing motion, though, the way I explain it. It's really just sort of getting a little tension here letting it pull through about to this point, letting it come back down, really just warming our arm up, stretching our arm out. Yeah. We have them, go through, depending on their age, hey, if we can get 15 solid reps in of every single thing, awesome. And then for the older guys, it's like if you can just, really without thinking about it, we can get up to 25 reps here. And I don't know if that's on the high end, but that was the stuff that we were doing through college, and it never really felt like a workout. It was always, what I say too, I'm like, this shouldn't be something that, is tiring you out or straining you. Maybe in the first, 2 or 3 times you've done it, they seem a little difficult. But I mean, like pre every inning I pitched or, appearance that I had, I was going right through these J-band routines and exercises. So getting into then sort of the arm workout stuff that we do. Once again, 2.5 pound plates, and we'll go reps of 15, and we'll start with arm circles. We've got palms up, and we go forward, little, medium, and then big. And they're slow, controlled reps is like a big thing that we talk about. And then we'll do the same thing, reverse. And like this is really the big burner through sort of all of it. With that little, medium, big, slow control. From there, we come out to a Y. Mm-hmm. And we have a 4 count down. 1, 2, 3, 4, up. And then we're out and around. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then after that one, we're straight up. 1, 2, 3, 4 again. We then go into our 90s where we're here, keeping these guys in line. And everything is really just an emphasized slow and in control motion. Mm-hmm. And then from there, let me angle this down just a little bit. The last 2, we get into a sort of bent position here, bringing these arms back, slow and control, bringing them back, slow and control. And then the final one, we're back here at the hips. And we're here, here, here. And then we go through 3 rounds of that, depending on age, depending on, sort of where we're at strength-wise. 10 to 15 rep range. And then, literally what I typically say is, if you're a really big, strong guy, then you can hop up to those 5 pounds. If you're the 6'4", 215 dude, 5 pounds, 5 pounds is great. But, for most of them, I just continuously sort of, let them know every other form of weightlifting, everyone's trying to up their weight. And I was like, that's not what we're doing here. It's like a always 5 ounces, these 2.5 are more than enough, and they're feeling it anyways by the end of that stuff. And then we also finally for that like arm care stuff, we just do arm circles to start. Thumbs up, little, medium, big, forward, thumbs down, little, medium, big, forward, and then backwards, repeat the same process. And I always talk to the young guys or even, 14, 15-year-olds who have never done it, and arm circles are difficult for them, and I'm like, man, dude, if we're having a hard time just spinning our arms in place for 10 reps here, and then on the high end, once again, 15, 25 reps in there, and you can't make it through, just forward. Part, it's like, we got some room to grow here. And so I always let them know, it's like, this is the stuff that Devin and I were doing, from the time we were 15, myself 14, and I am curious about the age for, where you sort of want to start with that stuff, because a lot of aspects, myself specifically, I did all of this stuff. I have a pretty good idea of why my arm fell apart. I think actually an exact idea of why. And regardless of all of those things that I did, those, the preventative maintenance stuff that we touched on yesterday, that was the part where I crumbled. I was like overwork. And all of that overwork was into my right arm. Just everything I did was like, how can I possibly push this? How many teams can I play for? How many innings can I play? It's like, and all that at the time was like awesome. When I'm 16, 17, and I'm like, sweet, I'm for 3 teams, having all the right people look at me, I'm super excited, and then I'm pitching well, and then all of a sudden I'm 18, and I remember it like it was yesterday. One day I was like, my arm hurts, like it doesn't, it's not sore, dude, and and then velo drops, and then 2 weeks later you're like, hey, my arm's ripped up everywhere. And so yeah, that's the stuff that we go through, and I'd love to hear your take on it, on thing that you think we should add or take out, or just thoughts as far as, once again, age, of when you think guys should start doing that, how many times a week they should be doing it. Right now, I say like out of 7 days out of the week, we can get it in 3 times. We're not going to do it consecutive days. Give yourself that time in between, a day on, 2 days off, day on, 2 days off, go again that way. So yeah, floor is yours.
Yeah, so I would say my kind of a couple things. So the stuff you're doing is great. So you guys are familiar with the Thrower's 10, I assume, exercises. If you're not familiar with the name of it, it's basically what you're doing, which I'm sure that's what a lot of guys use, or use some variety, use some variation of it, where they're taking a lot of those activities you guys are doing, bands, the external rotation here, internal rotation here, even the bent over stuff is great. A lot of times we have them do it in clinic, like on a table, where they're getting into, and you talked about like going up and doing the Ys, doing what we call it, the full cans, full can versus empty can. We've kind of gotten away from empty cans. I don't really do empty cans at all. It's been shown, just again in the rehab world, you can get the same amount of supraspinatus activation, which is one of the rotator cuff muscles, the one that's most commonly injured, by doing full can, and you don't put yourself in this like impingement position. This is the way that we test for impingement of the shoulder. So we've kind of gotten away from that a little bit, and the research has kind of gotten away from that a little bit. Light weights, young kids getting formed down, it's probably not that big of a deal, but we try to stick to, even if you do just full can or double up on full can versus empty cans, that's kind of what we do. But the Thrower's 10, like I said, the stuff you were doing, we're doing that again in rehab. Almost as soon as they have full motion back, we're getting through that, because it doesn't put a ton of strain on, again, whether it's the elbow or the shoulder joint itself. We do a ton with the shoulder blade, right? Like we're trying to strengthen the muscles kind of between the shoulder blades versus the actual rotator cuff, or right on the shoulder. I shouldn't say strengthen the rotator cuff. We are trying to strengthen the rotator cuff, but we're not trying to, like you said, build brute strength in that. We're just trying to like prime it for our activity. The age part, the age is a great question. I love the age part. When do you start? The answer is I don't know. The reason I say that is, as we talked about earlier, it's all about development. You got 12-year-olds that are 6'2", and then you got 16-year-olds that are 5'6", and haven't their voice hasn't dropped yet. You know what I mean? So that is a very fluid question and answer, in that pitch counts are great. I looked up for this, like the Little League pinch count numbers. If you pitch 85 plus, you're done after that hitter, and you're off for 4 days, and 55 to, I can't remember the numbers, but anyway, they got the tiers, and that's how many days of rest you got. And then they break it down by age as well. Like if you're this old, you only throw this much, which are good guidelines. Those are, obviously you have to have guidelines of some kind, but again, we all know the kid who, was 12 years old and was stepping halfway to home plate, from the pitcher's mound on the Little League field, compared, and then you got myself, like I was a late bloomer. I didn't grow until sophomore, junior in high school, and comparing me to some of my buddies who grew a little earlier, it's like, well, that kid's 17 and this kid's 14. So how do you draw the line? And unfortunately, it rests on us. It rests on you guys. It rests on educating people that the numbers are good, and those are a good place to start. But they are just that. They're a good place to start. The beauty of watching the Little League World Series is they usually have the big kids out there throwing the most, which is good, because they're at least developed enough to handle some of the stresses. Not that their form is great, but a lot of times they're at least have enough. They can create enough force with, again, lower half, middle half, trunk, to not put too much strain on their arm. But yeah, the age thing, all that stuff, the stuff you guys do, like arm care stuff, it's good, man. It's all about form. It's all about technique. Can they control it? Like you said, you got kids who can't do arm circles, then we're not putting any weights in it. We're definitely not putting any weights in their hands. They can't do a 2.5. We're definitely not bumping up to 5. I put together a little program for a football team that I assistant coach out here in Grand Rapids, and just like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Turkish get-ups, but they're basically like a very functional, like you start from the ground and have to stand all the way up, but you just hold the weight like all the way up. And I showed it to them. I'm like, I use 5s, and my shoulders get tired. And you got the high school kids. I'm like, you guys do whatever you want. I was like, but I'm telling you right now, like 5 is gonna be about all you want. You see the kids with like 10s and their weights are dropping and jacking them in the nose. It's like, it's just until they can do it properly, the motion again. And it seems silly, like with no weight at all, but until you can control that, we hold them. We hold them back. We say, listen, you gotta get this right. And especially with me, again, I can stereotypically almost without fail. The kids that I see are 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds. Growth plates haven't closed yet. They're still growing. Their bones have outgrown their muscles. Again, they're flailing everywhere. They're super mobile, but they just don't have control over that stuff. And those are things that, again, as coaches, as trainers, as educators, rehab specialists, we just have to educate people. We have to educate coaches. We have to educate parents. We have to keep people accountable to take care of those things for us because we just can't be everywhere. But it's going the right way. Again, when we were playing, I don't know about you guys, like we didn't have pitch counts. 20 years ago, literally we didn't have pitch counts. So I mean, it's going in the right way. And I don't know, what else do you do? Do you measure kids' height? Do you measure kids? Do they got did their voice drop? Did they have armpit hair? And then you count their how many pitches they throw? No, you can't do all that. So it's a good place to start. But age, like I said, it's just very fluid. It's very it requires you to have a skilled set of eyes on it to know when to progress or what to start with or what are we looking for. But yeah, all that stuff is, like I said, if you guys look up or anyone watching, you guys look up the Throwers 10, like it's pretty much everything you did. There are a couple variations on it. But it's a good kind of just, again, warm up to get you primed for throwing.
Yeah. So I guess I'll talk real quick about like my arm injury in particular, and then Devin's as well. Happenstance, both of us got the same surgery 2 days apart.
Same surgery 2 days apart.
Very weird. However, through that, and I was a pitcher, so it made a whole lot of sense. Say what?
So you said the same surgery 2 days apart?
Literally 2 days apart. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, like it happened. Yeah. So that was going into senior year of high school. So I was 18 years old.
What surgery was it?
I tore my labrum. I had a slap tear in the labrum, and then rotator cuff as well. Yep. So for me, it made a lot of sense. And you talked about pitch count and moving in the right direction. And like when I was in Little League, we didn't have a pitch count. We had an innings limit. It was like you could throw 8 innings in a week.
Yeah, that's true. We did have that. Yep.
And so like I would literally throw 6 innings on Saturday, and then you had 1 game during the week, and I would throw 2 of those innings, in that next day. And but when you're a kid, I'm like, sweet, I'm like the best kid on the team. I get I'm pitching, yada yada. That then transfers into playing travel ball. Also with us growing up in California, we had no off season. I mean, I never had an off season my whole life, and I only played baseball as well. I played baseball and then, was at the beach doing nonstop overhead motion, nonstop pattern overload in the shoulder. And so then by the time I was a sophomore, going into my sophomore year in high school, I was playing high school baseball that went year round. I was playing for a travel ball team that went year round and periodically playing in showcases, on weekends on top of that, throwing 7 innings at a time. And then, 2 days later, throwing 7 more innings. But through all of that, I always say, I'm like, my arm would be tired and it never hurt, is my thought. And I'm a 16-year-old kid who, once again, I'm like throwing harder than everyone else. When I was 16, I could throw 85 miles an hour and I weighed nothing, so like in my head, like I'm sitting, I'm like, everything's going well. All my pitches are going well. I'm pitching well, everything. And then I think going into junior year of high school, it was like, then we started doing team scrimmages, like even during practice, and I would throw 5 innings there and then play a game with one of my other teams the next day. And then 2 days later, throw another 7 innings. And I did that for, pretty much 2 straight years, 16 to 17 years old. And then going into senior year, like I said, I remember sitting on I had just woken up the next day after throwing 7 innings the night before. and thinking like, it hurts just lifting my arm up right here.
Yep.
And like,
Yep.
and I've never felt this week ever. I went out and pitched that day again and was like probably throwing 69 miles an hour, like, and I was like, I could feel it. I was like, this is really strange. Whatever. Literally, I was like, whatever. Everyone says their arm hurts at some point. I was like, this is just my arm hurting. It'll get better. And then probably threw for like 2.5 more months before I was like, I literally could not throw a baseball.
Right.
So, got the labrum repaired, had a slap tear, got my rotator cuff sewn up, which in hindsight probably shouldn't have done. Which then also led to I had a really weak bicep tendon from there, and my bicep then shortly after detached from my my whole arm just everything pretty much. I just say it exploded. Everything that was allowing me to throw a baseball, with any force whatsoever. So then after that is when I really started getting like educated on a lot of the stuff that you've been talking about. And I worked with some really unique dudes and whatnot. And one of the things, like my biggest limiting factor due to these surgeries is once again, this rotation here. Once I get to about here, the rest of my shoulder has to come up in order for me, to move through this, and then forget about this anymore.
Open them back,
I cannot get there, right? So a couple of things that I learned through that, working with some dudes post-surgery, trying to get back, in which I actually did get back to playing and ended up throwing harder, short amount of time, and then it was right back to square one. That was then that bicep tendon tore, and it was like gone. That was end of baseball for me right there. But some stuff that we really worked on was, how your body really works together, and different things affect different areas of the body. So my hips, were incredibly tight, and I was never aware of it. And so like I said, I was never a huge dude. Like at my biggest, I'm 6 foot, 190 pounds. That was my absolute biggest that I ever was. I was working my tail off to get to that point. But, most of my life, it's 6 foot, 175 pounds. But I could just explode through my hips really well. That's what is always sort of my advantage as far as throwing a baseball with any force behind it. I can just, explode through those hips. So post-surgery, I'm telling them, I'm like, look, man, I can only get to like about here at this point. I can't do anything. In order to then at least get me to here, we started with my hips and literally opening those things up and loosening everything up through there. I mean, my glute, like you could like give me the lightest massage ever, like anywhere around my hips, and I was like screaming in pain, like how tight I was everywhere, and just had no clue about any of it. And it was like, he just kept saying like, look, man, like if you've been playing as much as you're telling me, and you've done nothing around any of this area as far as loosening yourself up, or taking care of any of that, like that would have never dawned on me. And I don't think, once again, I'm just, kind of plead ignorance as far as being a 15, 16-year-old, and like all I saw was I'm throwing harder than everyone. I'm pitching better, I'm getting asked for teams, and like everything's looking for me. And just never would have considered a pitch number one, because of my competitiveness. I was just like, I don't care. Like, sure, my arm's a little tired today, but like, I want to play. And then would still like go out and do well. So it was like, I'm gonna do it again. Give me one day, and I'll be back. But all of that accumulative stress over and over. So like for me, it makes perfect sense when I look back on it in hindsight that of course my arm gave out. I'm way too young to be doing all of this stuff, regardless of the shoulder workouts that I'm doing. Not to mention all that stuff that I'm talking about. Like I'd burn through that and then go play like, a game that night after doing it. And it's like, oh my gosh, doing. So Devin's a little bit different through that because he's more interesting to me due to like the position that he played. Because I pitched from the time I was like 15 to 22. Like that's all I did. I only pitched. And also through that, one other note that has always been strange to me is that I've never had any elbow soreness, any elbow, like never been tender, anything. It was like shoulder. It's so where Devin's got a little bit of the opposite. He's got elbow pain that comes through and whatnot. But myself and my younger brother included, who throws near submarine, both of us have zero elbow pain. Like, it's never gone there. And it was like always like, oh, Tommy John's the most common one, yada, yada. That was always my thought as far as like arm soreness. I was always like, hey, everyone's shoulder is sore. I was like, but my elbow, I mean, I'm telling you, not a percentage of tenderness that was ever there, which has always been strange to me. And I'm not sure if I just have the greatest,
greatest UCL in the history of UCLs. Yeah.
Dude, and I just got with my shoulder or what's up with that? If you have any guesses to why I, through all of that throwing, have never once torn my elbow. A
few things. So, I talked with Devin, not yesterday, but I don't know, a month ago, I sent him an article just on mechanics in general. And I haven't seen either of you guys throw, obviously. Hearing your story about being tight, there's kind of a happy medium of everything. So specifically, we talk about hips moving, hip to shoulder, like ratio, basically we call it, like when your hips go compared to when your shoulders go, or when your shoulders open compared to when your hips open up. And if it's not enough, okay, you're putting too much strain, or if it's too much, you're putting too much strain. So like up the chain, essentially. So, the way to think of it is, like I said, if we wind you up, you know what I mean? If I wind you up, which is what we do when we get into our, like the wind up phase of a throw, okay, we sit on our back leg, we start, and as we start to come forward, we uncoil, right? If we don't uncoil enough, okay, let's say everything stays strong, we have too much stability, our hips are too tight, our core is too tight, all of the force coming from our back leg, okay, we need force going forward, but we also need that rotational force, okay? So, again, we talked about the planes. Like the plane going front and back is good. We're good on that. But the plane where we have to rotate, okay, where we have to create this torque, we just lose that. So we say, okay, we're not getting any rotational force, but I still want to throw 85, okay? So I got my legs going forward, and that's great, and we get some force from there. But we talk about like the rotation, losing that, we talk about like the merry-go-round, like going around this way when we're pitching. It's like, if we don't get any rotational force, or we don't get any torque from there, say, okay, I still want to throw 85. Now I gotta gum up. I gotta get this arm going and make up for the whatever it is that I lost. And if you didn't know, if you've been doing it your whole life, you would never know that you were even putting yourself in that spot. Versus just the opposite. You see, I got someone who they wind all the way up and they uncoil too early. Okay, everything goes too early, so then we lose all that rotational force before it even gets up the chain, and then. Okay, I want to throw 85 still. I still got to use my arm to make up for that loss of force. And there's this happy medium, man, where like, and it's different. Obviously we all watch MLB or college or whatever. If you see 10 different pitchers, you got 9.5 different motions at least. But they all get to they get to these certain spots when you frame by frame it, which is what we have the ability to do. Obviously at work is, we slow-mo camera these guys and boom, boom, boom. We see where they're at these different phases to make sure that they're not opening too soon, or not opening or opening late, or not opening at all, or whatever it is. Where is that force being lost instead of, all of it going at the same time, all of it happening at the same time. Typically what we see is whatever body part ends up being injured is either shoulder we see a ton of because the force has to go through the shoulder before it gets to the elbow. So if it breaks down at the shoulder, it doesn't matter. It's not, it's not getting, the elbow is just a bridge, to the hand, to the ball. Versus if our shoulder's solid, okay, but we're still not creating enough force with the rest of our body, shoulder, core, hips, legs, and we still want to, get to 90 or whatever it is. Now we're putting all that force kind of here at the elbow. I'm very simplifying it, of course. But, like we talked about with the guys in the bigs, they're time bombs, man. Like the guys that are throwing 100, whether they like it or not, hats off to Verlander. That dude's still doing it and has been doing it. Bless his heart. But like I said, we said Syndergaard's down, Sale's down. Strasburg's down, Darvish is down at some, those guys are all, the big throwers at some point in their career.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know, whatever. Tanya, all those guys, you know what I mean? Like, and again, the guys that fix them, they say like, yo, I'll put it together, but just for what? So you can tear it back apart, and you just have to know that that's how this is going to go. It's a little different with the guys they write about in the book and they write about in the research because they're signing $1 million contracts versus you and I are just trying to go to work. But that changes things a little bit. But in terms of, like you said, like labrum and rotator cuff and all that stuff, like what do we see? As we talked a little yesterday, I've read some research, and of course I took, or I guess I was fed some research, which I love, about, they go on spring break or spring training. All of the pitchers in the organization are there, 30-something, low 30s, high 20s, and all but 2 of them had some sort of on MRI abnormality, something, whether it was a bony defect, whether it was a labral defect, whether it was a rotator cuff defect, and we're talking no symptoms. Like these guys they're healthy, they're pitching in spring training. So it's okay. You go in because your shoulder hurts. I go in because my elbow hurts. You go get an MRI. Something's coming up. Like whether you like it or not, like something. If you played baseball since you were a kid, especially, something's popping up. Either we got something in there is torn or frayed or could be repaired, in the normal person by the surgeon who wanted to repair it. Whether or not it needs to be, the guys that are throwing 100, they have more external rotation motion. They have what's called humeral torsion, which I don't know if you guys are up on this, maybe you've heard about that, but basically your humerus, your bone, if I'm sitting just like this, in my socket, it's in the right spot, but my arm is back here. So what happens with guys that throw, especially when they start at a young age, your bone actually twists. So people's upper arm, like the guys in the bigs, I'm gonna throw out a number above 50%, whatever it is. They have this humeral torsion, it's called, that allows them to get extra external rotation motion. Increased external rotation equals increased velocity equals increased risk for injury. So here we are. It's like you can do it however you want, but those you're not gonna make to the bigs throwing 82, right? Not gonna happen. So that's the deal you make with the devil. It's like, that's what we got to do. So, again, going back to your story, like, did we need to get the rotator cuff fixed? In my experience, and what I've read is they try not to at all possible, just because the rehab is so brutal. There's a lot of rules to follow. There's our ability to get back to where we were is much less than compared to like a labral repair. But again, they try to do labral repairs as little as possible too. They try to do everything, as little as possible, just because of the ramifications of what happens post-surgically. With you, if you go see a general orthopedist who's not, doesn't work with overhead athletes as much or doesn't have as much history with it, what they did with you, I guarantee is what they do is they tighten your capsule down. You talk about losing motion. They tighten because you tear your labrum, so you got a little bit of extra motion in the ball and socket. Tear your labrum. You say, okay, well, we don't want that to happen again. How do we fix that? It's like, okay, we're going to lock down that capsule so that way we can't move as much. That way we can't slide. We just mechanically we can't do it. There's a block in the way. We're not going to allow it to happen. Takes longer to get your motion back. Just sets everything back. And then we can't do strengthening as early as we like. All these things, just get set back. So again, we try as much as possible to be conservative, but also, again, if the goal of surgery is to get you back to playing, but surgery puts you at a reduced risk for reduced ability to get back to playing, then what are we doing? But it's just it's all the beauty of me. I'm ever the optimist. Like the beauty of the technology and the surgery and the research and the advancements are that they're ever changing, right? They're always coming up. This internal brace wasn't around, to my knowledge, maybe 5 years ago they started using it. I've only seen it in the last couple of years in my practice. It's really cool. It seems to be really cool. The research on it's pretty good right now. I haven't seen any research on guys getting the internal brace and then going back to high level from my experience. I'm sure it's out there, and I'm sure there are people that have done it. I just haven't seen it yet, and I hope that is the case because, again, they can cut down the recovery time. But, it's just as we talked earlier, like it's all so individualized. uterior labrum, is it in the same, slap tear? Sure. Superior labrum, anterior to posterior. If we look at it like a clock, we got noon up top, we got 2 o'clock here, we got 10 o'clock back here. They say anywhere from 10 to 2. That's similarly where the bicep tendon attaches to the labrum. So typically those all kind of go hand in hand. But again, how big was the tear? What direction was the tear? Did it peel off? There's so many factors that go into that and change not only how the surgery goes, but how the recovery goes.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, not to beat a dead horse, but I mean, I had labrum surgery, and when we're not playing baseball, we worked out in the morning, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We'd play a doubleheader right after that on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then all of us were playing travel ball teams. On travel ball teams, we were going and playing on the weekend tournaments and stuff like that. And then what are we doing at 16, 17 years old when we're not doing all that stuff? We're going to the beach. We're going and we're playing wiffle ball. We're playing, we're going and we're surfing. We're going and we're bodyboarding. And, I know a bunch of Southern California doctors that work with baseball players also work with surfers, because all it is that overhead motion. So that's what we're doing on top of everything that we were doing. And I don't know, by the grace of God, I had an unbelievable recovery. I was able to have a full college career at Hope. And the doctor that I talked to was like, dude, you have limbs like a lizard. I've never seen a recovery like this. And I wish I could give him credit. I can't remember his name for the life of me, but he did a phenomenal job with it, and couldn't be more thankful. But I don't want to keep for too much longer, man. We've been here for almost an hour, but I do want to send kind of a final message to coaches and to parents and to players, and that from our end. And obviously, I'm gonna let you kind of have your piece in this, but from our end is be proactive versus reactive. Take care of your body. You only get one. And if you're blessed to have one that allows you to throw a baseball 90 miles an hour, I think you have keys to a car that costs a little bit more. Therefore, you should take care of it even in that sense. So that's from me and our end. But I just want you to get that word out. What you think those need to hear.
Yeah. So here's kind of my take-home points. Again, I'm kind of a research guy. So here's a couple of things I would tell parents, coaches, athletes, everybody, educators of the like. So statistically, Little League, so we're talking 18 and under 18. Kids that report fatigue while pitching are 36 more likely not to have an injury, but to have a surgery related to that fatigue, whether it's shoulder, elbow. Those are kind of the 2 most common ones with baseball, obviously. 36 times more likely. Okay, I mean, that's an insane number. That's something that it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. Now, everyone has pitch fatigue, I'm sure, and not everyone obviously gets injured, but 36 times more likely to have surgery and to miss time because of surgery, that's a huge number. Pitching 8+ months out of the year, pitching, not throwing, pitching 8+ months out of the year. This talk to you guys maybe down south, out west. 5 times more likely to have surgery. Again, not have an injury, but to have surgery due to some kind of throwing mechanism, some kind of overhead athlete, again, usually shoulder, elbow. Travel ball. Strictly playing travel ball on top of your regular season. This is looking more in the 15 to 18 category, like the high school age. 5 times more likely to have elbow pain. Again, now we're not talking about surgery, but elbow pain, which again, we're talking, are we missing time? So we're on all these teams, but then we can't play anyway. Like, what's the point? Again, those are kind of the big things I would say. I would talk about, again, arm care is full body care. And the more that you can get specialized eyes on it, whether that's you guys or whether that's myself, especially in these times, we got extra time, we're working half days or whatever everybody's doing. We got time to respond to people. I'll get Devin, obviously, get like my Instagram information and email information, whatever contact information you guys need to get a hold of me. I'd love to talk with you guys and at least be a voice to help you guys meet whatever goal it is that you're trying to meet.
Absolutely. And I really hope to follow up. We're hoping to do a follow-up with Brian Hatzel, works with a lot of MLB guys, big biomechanics guy. And then hopefully after all this craziness is done, get all of us together in a panel type discussion. But for the time being, Scotty, we can't thank you enough for your expertise. I think this is really, really, really going to be a great resource for the youth, and the people teaching the youth, and if we can teach kind of this next generation the right way using the technology that we have, the luxury that we have, I think that we can really move the whole sport forward and give players an opportunity to play as long as they want, not as long as their bodies let them. So thank you, buddy. We really appreciate it.
Cool, man. We'll talk to you.
All right.